explosive matchup coming up next. We have Congo's Dalcha Lungiambula, better known as Dalcha Champ, the former EFC heavyweight and light heavyweight champ, taking on a short notice replacement in Maluko, Markus Perez. Matt, we have talked about Dalcha Champ probably all of November, all of December, now into January. Why? Because he was supposed to fight Carl Roberson, and now Markus Perez. And listen, overall, I was looking forward to those Carl Roberson matchups because Dalcha was going to be moving from 205, where I wouldn't say he's been a mainstay, but he has been at 205 for some time, moving down to 185. He spent time training in camp for that one with Black Cobra Striking System's own, a man who hates sleeves, Dewey Cooper, one of my favorite coaches out there in MMA, just because of the no sleeve fact, and that's pretty much it. But he had been training with Dewey Cooper and a lot of the fighters in Vegas getting ready for that fight. You know, we really accentuated a lot of different aspects of Dalcha's game. You can go back and check out that preview in the tab for the Roberson fight. But overall, that fight's a lot different from this one. And I had a lot of worries and reservations going into the fight with Roberson because, again, it got really close to, game time for the first booking when Dalcha would have been cutting the weight. I was worried. And he didn't weigh in. And then in the second time, he weighed in as kind of an alternate. And I put it there in the graphic. He weighed in 185.5. So not like it was a huge issue. And those fights were only spaced out by about a week or two. Now he's coming into this fight, again, on short notice against a fellow striker. I think it's fair to say Markus Perez by now. Not necessarily a grappler because he's really a guy that's oddly become happy with his hands in Markus Perez. And if you look at Markus Perez taking a fight like this on short notice, sure, there's some upside because you beat a former EFC champ, but this is a tough fight to take on short notice.
It is a really weird one, and we were both in agreement. Listen, Carl Roberson stylistically is a very bad matchup for Dalcha Lungiambula because he's so much more just refined as a technician on the feet. Markus Perez doesn't really have that going for him, though. So if Dalcha just... Let's say Dalcha comes in here like he does most fights. Just bum rushes Perez. We're going to see what happens. He can crack Perez and put him down pretty quick because Perez will throw those big looping shots with you. He will get into one of those Max Holloway, Ricardo Lamas-esque scraps where it's, okay, I'm going to give a shot to eat a shot. Dalcha Champ's not the guy you want to be doing that against. And unless he's got a front kick like Ankalaev that we don't really know about and he's just going to pull that out at some point, I don't know how Markus Perez wins this fight. Because when I look at how you beat a guy like Dalcha Champ, you either need cardio, a really good wrestling game, a really good submission game, or you have to be technical on the feet. Do any of those things really describe Markus Perez in the year 2021? Not really. Like, he is a good grappler if he gets the fight to the ground. He has anaconda chokes. He choked out Ian Heinisch back in LFA. Like, he has a good skill set on the mat. The issue is, it's not like that's his active goal is, okay, I'm going to throw hands, and then once I get close, I'll work for a takedown, then I'll work my way to your back, and then, step 1 to step 5, eventually get the rear naked choke. He's going to go out there, really just kind of brawl with you, and if he drops you or if there's a slip or whatnot, he will engage in the grappling at that point, but it's not his number one goal. And if that was his goal, let's say I knew what I know about Markus Perez, I know his background, I know how good of a grappler he is, I see how many wins he has by submission, I'm fairly confident going into this fight against Dalcha. But the issue is, that's not really how he fights anymore. He goes out there looking for the scrap, and we saw that in Dricus Du Plessis in his last fight, where he lands a couple good shots. Du Plessis didn't really look like he wanted to be in there, to be completely honest. Perez lands a few good shots, gets this massive confidence boost, and then just runs in kind of reckless and, oh, hey, you're a boxer now. So if you do that against Dalcha, you're going to sleep.
Let's focus on that Du Plessis fight really quick, because, again, a couple of guys come from EFC and Dricus Du Plessis and Dalcha Lungiambula. And for Dricus Du Plessis, I don't think it's that he didn't want to be in there. He was so excited to be there that it was almost like he had the jitters and he really couldn't get started. So Perez finally kind of woke him up after some of those shots, which, again, you don't want to see that. But UFC debut, octagon jitters are a real thing. Du Plessis ate a lot of shots and then finally gave some and finished Markus Perez in that fight. And that's the thing. I look at Markus Perez, again, let's gauge it out of the last 5. Because if it really starts with Ian Heinisch winning the LFA belt, you beat James Boknovic, no longer in the UFC, you lose to Andrew Sanchez, you beat Anthony Hernandez, you lose to Turman, you lose to Dricus Du Plessis. Where does Dalcha Lungiambula fall into the talent pool, and who can I kind of compare him to, and in what fight can I kind of compare him to? For me, probably the Aldierte Sanchez fight, probably, if I had to really throw him in there. Because if I'm talking about a guy like Dalcha Champion, this is a national judo champ, an African champion in judoka, 2006, 2007, parlays that into MMA. And again, like a lot of wrestlers that we see, it's odd that I would say this and make the comparison, but with extreme couture guys, you see a lot of wrestlers go there. They have tons of power in their hands, and then all of a sudden they're power strikers. Dalcha's kind of like that in certain respects, where he has that strong judo background. You don't see him engaging in clinches. You don't see him really throwing people, going for a ton of takedowns. You see him absolutely destroying people with highlight reel knockouts, or, in the case of his last fight, getting knocked out by Akhmedov with that huge head kick. So if you look at Dalcha, and again, in his last few fights, the Daquan Townsend fight finishes him. Andrew Van Zyl, again, decision, so again, that doesn't really prove the point. Alain Baudot that you've seen in the UFC, somewhat surprisingly. That was one of the craziest knockouts I think we've seen in a while, where he flattened him out stiff like a board. So again, in this one, Dalcha, been working on his striking with Dewey Cooper. Say what you will about him. He's a striking coach, if anything. You don't have to worry about him making middleweight, or at least you didn't in his last fight, or getting ready for his last fight. He was able to make the weight successfully. I know a lot of people are going to ask in the comments, and they're going to hit me up in the DMs and say, is this fight at light heavyweight or middleweight? Because Topology has it as light heavyweight. Please, I have to throw this disclaimer out here now. Don't believe everything you see on Topology. It says Ramzan Amiv's reach is 69 inches. Don't believe it. I love Topology, but don't believe everything you read on Topology. MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, and the UFC have said that this fight's going to take place at middleweight. Topology says it's at light heavyweight. We'll see what happens, but if everybody says middleweight and the one site you go to says light heavyweight, just check out a couple of other sources. I have to throw that out there. But in terms of this fight at middleweight, again, if Dalcha makes the weight and everything works out, I have Dalcha winning this, and I haven't even talked about the odds.
So I agree with a lot of what you said, but I don't really agree with how you got there. So Andrew Sanchez does not fight like Dalcha champ at all. Andrew Sanchez will wrestle
level at where they're at in the division. At that point in time, I think Dalcha and Andrew Sanchez are a decent litmus test in terms of where they're at.
For Dalcha, though, every Dalcha fight really comes down to, it's binary. It's either he's going to knock you out or you're going to beat him by decision. And yes, the Ankalaev fight, excuse me, it is a bit of an outlier. I know he did get knocked out himself. But for the most part, Mark Hunt used to talk about this a lot. You're never going to win a decision looking for a knockout. And Dalcha champ almost always is looking for that knockout. And you're going to see cardio issues with him at a certain point, because there are going to be fights where he thinks he has a guy hurt. He's going to rush at them. He isn't going to get the finish. And then you're just going to kind of have a labored pace throughout the fight. This fight's going to be really good for about 4 minutes, and then it's going to fall off an absolute cliff, because Markus Perez has the same issue where it's not to the same degree where he's going to throw that one big explosion and then just be tired. He sort of fights with a labored pace throughout, and it's never like he reaches this big crescendo and then he crashes down. He just never has this overwhelming pace at any point of the fight. This fight for me comes down to who is controlling the center of the cage. Whoever gets backed up towards the cage is not going to have a very good night. And I think Luke Thomas was the first person to talk about this, how getting backed up behind those two black lines in the UFC cage matters a lot more than I think people realize. And it comes down for both these guys. If Perez is the guy getting Dalcha up against the cage, if he can start working in some takedown attempts and land in combination on Dalcha, you can start to wear him down. The issue is, if you're doing that, the Koreshkov-Douglas Lima fight's a pretty good example of where Koreshkov has Lima up against the cage. He thinks he's having a ton of success, and Lima throws one massive bomb that catches Koreshkov and puts him out. That could be a likelihood in this fight, but I really do think whoever's being the aggressor will have more success, and I think that's going to be Dalcha.
And I mean, we've seen it, especially in that Dalcha fight against Ankalaev. He pushes the pace, has a ton of success, but when he gets pushed back, he doesn't. And if you look at Markus Perez, well, really, the fight against Andrew Sanchez is the perfect example.
All of his fights.
When he gets pushed back up against the cage, Dricus du Plessis, when he kind of started to put a pace on him. Wellington Turman, whatever you think of him in the UFC, that's another one. If we look at the total Topology picks, 417 of them, 87% Dalcha Lungiambula, 86% by knockout. If we look at the odds, Dalcha started a minus 350 favorite, now minus 142. Perez opened 260. He's now at a plus 117. I'm going Dalcha champion in this one. Again, I didn't have him to beat Carl Roberson. I had Carl Roberson to win that one overwhelmingly because, again, the glory acumen, the kicking game of Carl Roberson, the fact that he could slow him down. But with a guy like Markus Perez, again, what's he good at? His jiu-jitsu's pretty good. Well, Dalcha champion, way, like in his wallet and a couple of the folds under some receipts, has that judo background, like way back there. But again, I like the power, and if he's able to crack with some of those looping shots, I think Dalcha's got the win here.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this fight's going to be great until it isn't. And once it starts going bad, it's going to get bad pretty quick. I'm just going to warn everyone for that. But I do think Dalcha's going to be able to get the stoppage win, probably in the first round.
Matt, both of us going with Dalcha Lungiambula to get his second win in the octagon here against a short notice replacement in Markus Perez. Really looking forward to this card. Great co-main event. Warley Alves taking on Munir Lazez. And in our main event, we have Michael Chiesa taking on Neil Magny. Get locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.